I'm Jan with Jan Patek Quilts, and I do applique. Recently, I designed a fabric line called Crossroads, which has been hitting your quilt shops lately. And this is one of my favorite quilts out of that fabric line. Not the only favorite quilt, but one of them. It's called Eagles and Roses. This center block might be thought by some people to be rather challenging. So I thought we would do a series on challenging aspects of quilts, and we're going to focus on this center block to begin with. It's block 1 in the block of the month, Eagles and Roses. Okay, the size of the block itself is 34 by 34. So you cut your background 34.5 by 34.5. That's in your pattern. So here's the basic block we're going to be making. The first thing you need to do is take the block after you've cut it out, 34.5 by 34.5, and iron it in two. So there's a good strong crease down the center. That way you'll know where to put your center stem, and the whole block will be balanced, we hope. Okay, now we've got to make the center stem. So you cut the center stem, and it will tell you how long, I can't remember, but you cut it by 1.5 inches, okay, because you want a 1-inch center stem. Now you can just fold or iron under a 1/4 inch on both sides. That will work fine, and it will give you what you need. Or you can use, if I can't drop it, a clover bias maker. And this is the 1-inch clover bias maker. And if you're going to use that, you take your strip that you've cut the right length by 1.5 inches and spray it down. You can just use water, or you can use one of the starch ones. I tend to just use water most of the time, but the others work real well because they keep things stiffer. And then you put it in the edge. That's why the others are good, but this works. And start feeding it through. Then I take a pin, and it's why I like the kind that has the slit in the back instead of as solid. And then you take your iron and iron it down, and your bias maker will turn under your seams for you very nicely. So you just follow the bias maker down. And this is for bias, but your center stem isn't bias. It's just a straight stem. I don't know how long it took me to realize that straight stems needed to be turned under evenly too. But one day it was kind of like, why am I burning my fingers like this? Why don't I use the bias maker? So I did. And I haven't burnt my fingers since. So, there. There are tools in the quilt world, and there are gadgets. This is a tool. Okay, so here we have our center stem all neatly made. Now, we spread out, and that's a reason I've done this on my lap. Oops, there I went. But it really is easier if you have a big space, because this is such a big block. Now, another thing you can do, which I have already done, is iron your urn down in two. So it will go on the center thing. That way you know you've got everything centered nicely. And applique your star on your urn first. Go back and watch the thing on points if you need help. But applique it on, and then you're going to baste under the top of your urn. And I'm going to sit down for this now, ladies. Now, what we're going to want to do is turn under the top of our urn about a 1/4 inch. So I've got that done, and basically I baste from the back, but you do a basting stitch, finger press it down, and then do a basting stitch about 1/4 of an inch. And that's just a big loose stitch. You're going to be pulling it out. Okay, now I tend to leave it there in case I need to thread my needle again. Put my needle in my needle roll. Look at your picture on your block, and you can see it's up a short way. So we've done that. Now what we're going to do is put this along the line. And now I'll put a pin in here. In fact, I'm going to scoot that over because I don't like where it is. There it is. It's right in the middle. You could iron it in two if you wanted to make sure it's right in the middle, but you don't have to. You can generally see that. Okay, now that we've got that done, what I'm going to do is take my applique glue, and I'm going to put this back, and I'll just put a dot. Oh, about every inch or so. Not a whole lot. You just want a teeny bit of glue. Okay, now we've got to take all of the vines, and they've got to come out of the urn. Before we sew the urn down, we need to know where each one of the vines is going to go. But the vines will have to be turned under at the bottom, just like this is. But since it's, now you can make bias and do this, but I tend to prefer a pattern because then I know exactly how long it's supposed to be and exactly where it's supposed to go. I don't have to measure everything. So you will find the patterns for all the vines in there except for the center one, and it'll tell you to do this. Now, the big end on each vine is the end that goes under the urn. The smaller one is the one that goes up under the flower or the berries or whatever. So the big end is what needs to be turned under. And just both sides, take a needle and thread, make sure there's a knot in the end of your thread. Just start, and if you can, try to remember to keep your knot on the outside, not on the inside, because you're going to have to pull these out later. And turn it under along the line you've drawn. I have already basted under all the rest. And the easiest ones to put under first are these. Just kind of eyeball how far in they need to go. And right now, you're not into rocket science. You know, it doesn't have to be exactly precise and right, because then what happens? Then you have the small one, because you can still adjust them. And then you're going to have the long one. This may need to be over just a little because we're going to have leaves. But most of the leaves don't come in until you get up here. They're not down here. Now, we've got all our vines on there. But they aren't going to stay there. If we put pins in them when we go to sew this down, we're going to stick ourselves a whole lot, so we go back to my glue again. And don't lose that. But fold it back, and on the inside, just once again, do a dot. About every 1.5 inches, just a light dot. Okay, and then one towards the end. Then lay it back down. And smooth it into place. You don't want your dots too close to the edge because you're going to have to turn this under. Now, as you sew these down, you can loosen it. It will come loose pretty easy. Right now, what you're interested in is in keeping these all where they go while you sew your urn down. Okay? So, Yeah, and if one comes out, don't worry about it right now. Okay, so you do exactly the same thing with all of these. Once you have all of these glued down, then you take this and fold it back and glue it down. And once again, try to get just inside the seam, just in case you have to, because it's hard to sew through the glue. The glue makes it hard. So you sew through the glue. And when you have those all done, and this, I glue all the way around the inside of the urn, both sides. Here, here, here. So now your urn's glued down. Now your stems are glued down. Now that you have everything glued down, including your urn, clip the curves on your urns, inside curves only, not outside. That'll give you points. Clip your curves, clip in here, and applique your urn down with your applique stitch. Okay, these are still just glued, and as you can see, when I sewed this whole thing down, all of those stayed where they went. And I did not have to fold this great big thing up under my hand when I was sewing it with pins sticking all through it. We're going to start sewing these down one by one, our stems. And in quilting, if you hand quilt, you know that the big thing that makes it go so much faster is not having to start and stop all the time. So you don't have to stop and end up, and you don't have to knot things and start all over again. Well, the same thing goes with applique. If you can just start sewing your vine here, and then sew around the leaf, and then go on with the vine, and then sew around the leaf, it is much easier than if you sew on the vine and then you sew on each leaf individually. And these are all shades of green, so you don't have to change color thread. Color thread? Whatever, you don't have to change the color of your thread. So, but you have to know where the leaf is going to touch here. You need, where's my things. The first thing you would do with this is go in, and I would not do it till you're getting ready to sew it, and clip the curves because fabric frays. Now, you've got your leaves, you've got your pattern. So what you do is you turn under the point to where the drawing is, not your thread, fold it under, fold this, and then once again, keep your knot on the outside if you can. Do your basting stitch and baste up close to the point that you've turned under. Now you turn under the other side. Okay, so now you have your leaf point on this end, and you baste it like that. Now what you're going to do is lay that right there with it touching where the vine's going to do it. You don't sew that down, but this is where the leaf is going to touch the vine. So as you start sewing this vine and turning it under, then you know where the leaf goes. And I just sit, like I said, I just sit and turn all these under, sitting in my chair at night. I sit and turn them all under and stick them in a Ziploc bag. And you know, you don't have to have it exactly right, because as you then sew back up this, you can loosen this and put it exactly where it goes. You've only put one dot of glue there, so it isn't going to make any difference. So I would glue all the leaves down that go on one vine, and then I would sew the vine down. And then I would go to the next one. The only time you have to be careful, and I don't think you really have to with this one because the leaves are almost all far enough out, that this is going to go here and here. Sometimes you have to be careful if the leaves kind of scrunch, so you need to at least lay these out and make sure things in the right place. Then you glue these down. Okay, then you just start sewing, and you start sewing here, and you go around here, and you come up, go around like this. And once again, once you've hit this stage, if you've done your prep work in advance, you don't have to think. You can sit and listen to TV while your husband watches it if you have to take your glasses off. And you just start sewing. You sew them all down. And since you're not using pins, you're using the glue instead, it's relatively easy. I sewed down this whole thing with all the vines in it. They didn't come loose, nothing happened. But even though you're dealing with a 34-inch block, you're not getting stuck with 6 million pins while you go and sew these down. And it's really pretty simple. It's just, then we have to do the flowers. I already did the circles in the center of the flowers, and these are the, I think these are 1 inch. They are 1 inch dots that I used that we would pull, put it on the back of the fabric, go to your circles one thing and watch if you haven't watched it already, but either trace the circle that's in the pattern or put your 1 inch dot on the back, do a running stitch, pull it tight, and then sew it onto your flowers. Okay, so the flowers are going here, and after you've got all your leaves on, sew the center on them and put your flowers on. I go ahead and make my flowers and my great big flowers and set them on here before I glue my leaves on to make sure there's room. You've already seen how to make berries, and they will go around up here, and then your large circle goes at the top. But you do all these last. Okay, now we're going to recap on what we did to make this very challenging 34-inch block with a giant urn in the middle. You fold the background block in two and iron it down to get a crease so we know where the center of the block is. Then we iron our urn in two so we know where the center of the urn is so we can place it on the crease. We make a 1 inch stem to go down the center crease using our 1 inch clover bias maker. We cut out all the rest of our stems and baste under the ends so they can fit under the urn. Then we glue down the stems, glue down the urn, and then sew the urn down. Then we baste under the ends of all of our leaves, and as we do each stem, we place the leaves in place and just put 1 dot of glue in the center, sew the whole thing down. We've made our flowers, and we glue them in place and sew them down, and we're done. Yay! And it really wasn't that hard, now was it, ladies? It was really pretty easy and lots of fun. So we hope you've enjoyed this tutorial from Jan Patek Quilts. Subscribe to our channel for more tips and instructions. Thanks. It's very charming, challenging. Okay, let's try it again.